about a topic today that is crucial to both dashboard designers and dashboard consumers. For dashboard designers, well-defined standards serve as a framework for dashboards that are visually appealing, functional, and user-friendly. And for dashboard consumers, these standards serve to provide an intuitive and enhanced user experience, allowing and leading to well-informed decision-making. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you to you, the Data family. This community has been the most inspiring and welcoming community I've had the distinct honor to share my expertise and collaborate with. And I am very honored today to share my thoughts with you on this very important topic of dashboard standards. A little bit about myself. My name is Scott Eaton. I'm a data visualization manager at JPMorgan Chase. I manage the US-based reporting and automation team for credit card data and analytics. I have been with Chase 12 years. I've been in the data visualization field for 19 years, and I've been using Tableau for 13 of those. I am a Tableau user group ambassador, as well as co-lead two Tableau user groups, the Data Family Group, Pathmakers user group, and the Central Ohio user group. On a personal note, I've been happily married for over 25 years to my wonderful wife, Angela. I'm a die-hard American football fan. My favorite team being the Cleveland Browns and the 2024 national champion Ohio State Buckeyes. I am a very avid, story-driven solo player gamer, with my favorite franchises in that genre being Assassin's Creed and Horizon, and my favorite TV franchise is Star Trek, with my favorite series in that franchise being Deep Space Nine, and that does have a tie-in to what I do. I started watching Star Trek in my late teens, and we know as data visualizers that storytelling is a huge part of what we do. And when I started watching Star Trek, and especially Deep Space Nine, that was the first series in the franchise to start telling an overarching story arc across multiple seasons, which I found for me was very important for me to be emotionally invested in the characters, as well as being immersed in the universe and the overall stories that are being told. They've continued to follow that template all the way through present day and current iterations, and that's just continued to foster my level of storytelling and has allowed me to have had the privilege of the career that I've had for almost 20 years. So, objectives for today. What should you hope to get out of this? Well, first, I hope you will learn the techniques to define, document, and deliver dashboard standards to make sure your dashboards have consistency and provide clarity for new users. Number two, I hope you will gain some insight into how those standards can help simplify your maintenance and development processes to help you avoid potential rework. And then finally, I hope you get an understanding of how having standards can identify risks, help you put controls in place to mitigate those risks, so that way your dashboards have accurate data for your users. So the agenda for today, first we're going to talk about why are dashboard standards important, what's the reason behind having them. Then next we're going to start talking about, okay, what are the components you should be defining in your standards? I'll talk first on a very high level what those components should be, and then we'll start diving into some individual items in each one of those components you should be focusing on. And next, once we've defined those components, how do you go about documenting them? What's kind of the best practices and formats you should put to document them in? Then finally, once you've defined them and documented them, what's an implementation plan to kind of disseminate that information to your users? And I'll talk specific examples around like executive users versus data analysts. So first, why should you have dashboard standards? What's the importance of them? Well, in order to understand the importance of them so then you can define the components, you need to have a foundational definition of what a dashboard is. And my definition comes from the book Information Dashboard Design by Stephen Few, who is a data visualization expert in the field, and his definition is, and I quote, "Dashboards are a visual display of the most important information needed to achieve one or more objectives, consolidated and arranged on a single screen so the information can be monitored at a glance." This book was the first book that I read almost 20 years ago to set my foundation for my career. And I've used this definition as the basis of everything I've done, from dashboard design to implementing strategy around dashboard projects. So whether it's this definition or a definition you found on your own and curated, as long as you stay consistent with that definition, it will set you up for success to where you can start defining your own dashboard standards. So why are dashboard standards important? First, they promote consistency in your dashboards to make sure you've got a uniform look and feel for your users. Number two, they promote accuracy to where you have accurate data, you're eliminating data errors, and your users who are coming in to use the data can rely on it as a trusted data source to solve the business problems that they're wanting to take a look at and dive into. Third, it provides clarity in the understanding of the data that they're looking at. Again, so they can make better and more informed decisions on the business problems they're looking at. And then finally, fourth, it promotes efficiency in your maintenance and your development processes, so that way you can avoid any potential rework that would come from errors. Okay, now that we've talked about the importance, let's go ahead and start diving into the different components you should be taking a look at when you're defining your standards. So first component we're going to look at is the data model. You should have some standards around your data model, specifically as it relates to physical and the presentation layers, because you want to have an optimal flow defined of how your data are, of how your users are going to consume and interpret your data. Next, you want to have standards around layout and design. Having standards around layout and design allow for dashboards to be visually appealing, intuitive, interactive, and enhanced user experience. And having well-defined standards around things like dashboard formatting, workbook formatting, chart formatting, make sure that all the visual elements in your dashboards are cohesive and easily consumable. Next, you want to have standards around color and visualization. Having standards around, okay, what's your standard color palette? What's your standard chart text you're going to use? This all makes sure that the visualizations in your dashboards have a very intuitive visual language to them. Next component is security. Sometimes a very overlooked piece of dashboards. Specifically, you want to have standards around the access methods, because you want to make sure that only your authorized users have access to your sensitive data to help you avoid potential data breaches that could arise from the unauthorized access if it were to exist. Next component, code reviews. Not a very, I would say not a very popular thing to do, but you have to have standards around who's approving the code reviews, what's that documentation going to look like, what's the timing of it, to make sure that, again, from a maintainability and scalability standpoint, your dashboards are easy to get to the users. And finally, documentation. For some of you who maybe attended my session last year, I spoke very heavily on the importance of dashboard technical documentation. So having standards around the template of your documentation, the tools that you use, things like that, allows it to be very comprehensive and keeps you in line with any audit controls that are in place, and specifically for designers and developers to help them with reverse engineering of the dashboard for any problem shooting they have to do or any enhancements they may have to do. All right, so now we've talked about some of the high-level components. Let's dive into a few items under each one that you should be hopefully focusing on in each one of those. So we'll first take a look at the data model. First thing is the data source. You want to have the right standards around data structures, especially when dealing with large data sets, because as we know, the more data that flows into a dashboard, the less optimal it can become, which decreases the user satisfaction. So you want to make sure you've got standards around those data structures to make sure data is getting loaded properly into the structure you need. Next, you want to have standards around the calculations. Again, we all know some calculations are more optimized than others, so having standards, you definitely want to have standards in place around which calculations should be set up on the back-end database side and which calculations should be implemented on the front-end tool side. Next thing, the physical layer, specifically around location. So you want to have standards on whether, okay, are you going to connect to the data directly through Tableau, through a data model you're creating there? Are you going to create a Tableau prep workflow and putting the file on a shared drive? Are you going to use some other ETL tool to put it on a shared drive? So have some standards in place around where that data is going to be accessed, because again, that does contribute to performance of your dashboard when loading the data. And also, the granularity of data is key as well. Sometimes you may need the granularity at the lowest level, sometimes you may need it highly aggregated. Just depends on the business requirements. So along with location, the data source, and the calculations, all those factors contribute into performance of the dashboard, and you want to make sure you keep your user satisfaction up for the usage of those. Next, presentation layer. This is in lines with like the metadata layer. You want to define clear and concise metadata. So what's going to be contained in that metadata dictionary? Where is it going to reside? As kind of your formal document, but to kind of bring it up a level for just ease of use, you want to specifically call out, and this is stuff I've put in standards I've created in the past. You definitely want to have standards around renaming of columns. I've seen many data sources that unless I wasn't familiar with the database and didn't know data engineering skills, I would have no idea what the columns mean based on the database column names that are being pulled in. So you definitely want to have standards around renaming columns into common business terminology to make it easy for anybody to look at. And then second item, having standards around the field definitions. Again, a lot of this data can reside in the metadata dictionary, but you don't want to always ask analysts to go look at that data dictionary, especially if they're not familiar with the data engineering piece. So going in to the fields on the data source pane, and when you're hovering over the field, being able in that pop-up tooltip to just see a quick field definition for those can provide a great help for many people. All right, next component we're going to look at is layout and design. First thing around dashboard and workbook formatting. So having standards around consistent resolution, consistent shading, font type, font style, font size, things like that allows your dashboards to be easily viewable across multiple devices and provides for a more accessible and easily readable dashboards for your dashboards. Having standards around things like tooltips and secondary information allows your users to easily consume that data without it overwhelming the main content of your dashboards. And then finally, having standards around KPIs and your band numbers allows you to make sure that your users are being drawn to those metrics first on your page to help aid in their analysis and get their analyses kicked off for the business problems they're trying to take a look at. Next up, you want to have standards around chart formatting, things like divider lines, access ticks, access rulers, labels. We as developers want to make sure that we're guiding the user and giving them an easier way to interpret the data, so that way they can get the insights they need quicker to get into their stakeholders. So having standards around these different things will allow them to do that. Next component, color and visualization. First thing, and probably for me one of the most important parts of a style guide, is the color palette. Having standards around the color palette is crucial and significantly influences how your users interpret and consume the data that they're looking at. Good standards makes the dashboard accessible, enhances the reading and their interactivity with it, and a well-defined color palette is crucial and normally is in line with the overall tone of the dashboard and the business purpose of the dashboard, and it evokes the emotion that you want out of it. Next up, standard chart types. You definitely want to call out what your standard chart types are. For example, calling out, okay, bar charts for comparisons, line charts for trends, scatter plots for correlations. You want to avoid and reduce the cognitive load that your users are going to have in interpreting charts. You want to make it as easy for them as possible. So calling out what those standard chart types are does that, and is in line with best practices and minimizes the risk of data misinterpretation. Next up, security. First thing, having standards around access methods. So are you using Active Directory groups for your users to get access? Are you implementing row-level security through Tableau itself? So defining standards around how your users are going to filter down to their data is definitely crucial. This, again, like I mentioned earlier, make sure that only authorized users have access to your sensitive data and helps you avoid potential data breaches. You want to have standards around who the approvers are for access into your dashboards. So a lot of times we have data that's segregated off that there needs to be different approvers. So you want to define who those are. What are the guidelines that need to be followed in order to approve that access? And if there is any unauthorized access, defining what's the mechanism that these approvers need to take to submit those requests to get those users removed. And then finally, you want to have standards around the access request. You want to have a standard way for users to access the dashboard and submit requests to get to them, just to avoid that ambiguity. So they're not thinking, okay, I need to go to this system to submit it, I need to go to that system, or I need to talk to this person or that person. You want to make it easier, as easy as possible for them to get to their data quickly and efficiently, and having those standards ensures then that all access requests get the same amount of scrutiny put to them. Next up, code reviews. First item under code reviews, the review timing. Having standards around timing, again, ensures the quality of your dashboard, the functionality, making sure all the security is there. It promotes feedback, and you want to define it, okay, is it something that's done just at the very end of the process? Is it something done that's multiple times? You just want to make sure that you have that timing well defined to be able to catch any issues that may arise, and just to make sure that things are going smoothly during the development process. Next, you want to have standards around who those code approvers are going to be. Are they going to be senior level developers? Are they going to be peers along the same lines of the people who are designing the dashboards? You want to have those defined, again, like I mentioned earlier, for maintainability and scalability purposes. Make sure you're catching any issues so no problems get pushed to a production state to where you have to do unnecessary production support, and again, just making sure your dashboards have that consistency and clarity that they need through standards. And finally, what is the approval documentation standard process? I don't know if it was today or yesterday, but I saw a great session on dashboard checklists. That is a great way for documenting and making sure that all the standards are being followed. Now you can determine how much content you want in that checklist, how little you want, but you should have some method of documentation from a control standpoint to make sure there's accountability and there's traceability in the process. So just make sure you have some standards around that as well. All right, finally, documentation. For me, this is very crucial. There's been many times during the course of my career that I've had to take over a dashboard from somebody, and there's been absolutely no documentation in place. And how many of you have had that happen to you? Wouldn't it have been nice to have, even at a bare minimum, documentation to just walk you through the basics of a dashboard, so you didn't have to spend all that time trying to figure it out, go into the workbook, go 3 maybe calculations deep into something just to figure out what it's doing. So having standards around documentation is very crucial for me. It allows you to make sure that whoever's looking at it knows the underlying structure of the dashboard, understands all the calculations and the logic that's going on, and definitely great from a reverse engineering standpoint for all level of developers. And defining the template, so having consistency around what items are you going to include, what sections are you going to include, what order are those sections, how detailed do you want to make them. That's just, again, going to make it a very consistent experience for everybody. You also want to have standards around the tool you're going to use to document it. Is it going to be manually? Is it going to be an automated tool through a tool like RapidDocs, which I've used very much in the past to automate the documentation? And then what is the format, the file format you want to put it out in? Is it going to be Word, Excel, HTML, PowerPoint? Just, again, standardizing on all that helps with the consistency and the readability of your documentation. Okay, now that we've talked about the components you should be defining, let's talk about how you go about documenting those. All right, the importance of why you want to document your standards is it's going to serve as a great reference document for any level of developer to come in and take a look, and definitely contributes to onboarding and training. Whether it's a new developer who's coming from an entirely different area that's never done data visualization before, or it's somebody that's coming from a different team where the standards are different. You want to have it documented in some format with a standard template to make sure that ease of transition is in place. A few tips on when you're creating that documentation: you want to make sure you're using clear and concise language. So don't just say, let's say under the standard chart section, use bar charts, line charts, scatter plots. Specifically call out what you want to use them for. Don't just say, okay, the dashboard's going to be formatted in Arial. Specifically call out, okay, is it workbook formatting? Is it, workbook formatting? Is it dashboard formatting? What parts are you calling out? Is it formatting for tooltips, business tooltips, charts, things like that? You want to clearly spell out what those standards are. And for the instance to where you want to create things like hidden filter panels, or specifically right now, because they haven't released it yet, when they talked about the rounded corners earlier, there is a trick that you can use in Tableau to use annotations and worksheets to create those rounded corners and use that as background shading. So making sure things like that, you have clearly defined steps on how to create that, and you have the visual aids to accompany that. So make sure any situation like that, you clearly have those in there. All right, now that we've defined our components and we've documented them, how do we go about implementing things to where we can get the information sent out to the users that we want? So you definitely need to conduct training sessions, and those training sessions could be varied based on who you're doing it with. You may be doing it with just executives who need to get a high-level view of what those standards are so they can disseminate it to the teams under them, or it could be very detailed for the analysts. So kind of figure out what those training sessions should be, because this is going to help encourage feedback, because a lot of times when you're putting this out there for the first time, the standards are not finalized yet. So you want to have it in an environment in such a way that it's promoting feedback to be able to continually do these training sessions and kind of get to that finalized version. And again, doing all this is going to promote adherence to those standards and allow, if there's any deviations from that, it'll allow you to address those in a timely manner. And then just from a kind of platform perspective, make sure you're using collaboration tools, whichever works best for you. For the ones that I've worked on in the past, I've used things like Tableau Storyboard to create an executive view to where they can easily just scroll through it and see things. But for a more detailed view for analysts, I'm putting it in something like a Confluence page, which is going to be easily sectioned out. They can click on the specific tabs they want to get to the sections that they need. Okay, so just in quick summary, what we went through today was, again, talked about the importance of having dashboard standards, why they're important, what's the reasoning behind them, then diving into, okay, what are the components you should be defining, both at a high level and then what the individual items are in there, things like code reviews, dashboard layout, color and chart types, things like that. And then once you've defined those and documented them, how do we go about implementing them for everybody? So I'd just like to say thank you to everybody. Hopefully this has been very informative for you and given you some thoughts and ideas on how to start defining your own standards. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to kind of help answer any questions you may have. And thank you. Appreciate your time, and open it up to any questions.
Good job, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah, still catching.
And I'm making sure. I just wanted to say a big thank you. I feel like coming from a financial institution, whenever we said it so well, like it makes me feel